My best friend stole my life's work. He never knew my secret plan to make him lose everything. The cold blue glow of the monitor reflected in his weary eyes. But that particular weariness wasn't from hours of coding. No, that profound exhaustion had a different source, a deeper one. It stemmed from watching him, Julian Thorne, the man he once called his brother, stand on that brightly lit stage, basking in the glory of his stolen creation. The applause was deafening, a wave of adulation washing over Julian as he accepted yet another prestigious award, his smile wide and genuine, or so it seemed to the captivated world. The elaborate hall, draped in shimmering blue and silver banners, pulsed with energy. Thousands of eyes were fixed on Julian, a charismatic figure illuminated by a dozen spotlights, his voice amplified to fill every corner of the vast auditorium. He spoke with an almost messianic fervor of innovation, of vision, of revolutionizing medicine with Ether, the adaptive AI he proudly presented as his own. Every word was a carefully constructed lie, every accolade a shard of glass in Silas Vance's memory. He watched from the quiet solitude of his cramped apartment, a world away from the dazzling lights and cheering crowds. The scent of stale coffee and unread books hung in the air, a stark contrast to the celebratory champagne Julian was likely toasting with. His name, Silas Vance, was not uttered. His countless sleepless nights, his intellectual sweat and tears, the very essence of his being poured into that code, none of it mattered to them. They saw a genius, a visionary in Julian. He saw a thief, a charlatan, a meticulously constructed illusion. His expression, however, remained impassive. There was no rage distorting his features, no desperate plea for recognition. Just a quiet, almost serene calm settled over him, the kind of stillness that precedes a great storm. Julian thought he had won. Julian believed his victory was absolute, his conquest complete. But what they didn't know, what Julian certainly didn't, was that every line of code, every feature, every triumphant word Julian uttered, was a meticulously placed fuse leading to an inevitable, spectacular detonation. The monitor's reflection showed not defeat, but the quiet satisfaction of a strategist watching the opening play of a long-planned endgame. Julian's moment of triumph was merely the final, crucial piece falling into place, precisely as Silas had intended. Their story, like many tales of ambition and betrayal, began with shared dreams. Julian and Silas were inseparable from childhood, bound by a mutual fascination with technology and an almost naive belief that they could change the world. They spent their formative years hunched over circuit boards in Julian's cluttered garage, fueled by sugary sodas and an insatiable curiosity. Silas remembered one particularly vivid afternoon, around their 10th birthday, when they rigged up a primitive but functional home automation system using salvaged parts. Julian, even then, was the natural showman, excitedly demonstrating how a clap could turn on the lights, while Silas quietly perfected the intricate wiring behind the scenes, ensuring every connection was flawless. He was the charismatic one, the natural leader, effortlessly charming everyone he met. Silas was the quiet one, the deep thinker, more comfortable conversing with lines of code than with people. They were, in many ways, two halves of a whole. Julian envisioned the grand applications. Silas painstakingly built the intricate machinery to bring them to life. They spoke of a future where technology served humanity, where complexity yielded to elegant solutions. And Ether was to be their magnum opus, the culmination of all those shared dreams, a testament to their combined genius. Ether was born from Silas's personal quest to solve a deeply rooted problem, the inefficiencies and diagnostic challenges within the medical field. He had witnessed firsthand the devastating impact of misdiagnosis within his own family, a lingering shadow that pushed him towards a singular purpose. He envisioned an AI capable of not just processing vast amounts of disparate medical data, patient histories, lab results, genetic markers, environmental factors, but of learning, adapting, and even intuiting complex patterns that human doctors, limited by time and cognitive biases, might miss. The goal was earlier, more accurate diagnoses and profoundly personalized treatment plans, moving beyond the current, often generalized, approaches to medicine. It consumed him. He sacrificed relationships, letting friendships wither due to his ceaseless work. His social life became non-existent. Even his own health took a back seat. He often worked for 72 hours straight, fueled by cheap, lukewarm coffee and an unshakable, almost spiritual belief in ether's potential. Sleep was a luxury, food an afterthought. He meticulously crafted every algorithm, every neural network layer, seeing the code not just as logic, but as a living, evolving entity. Julian, initially, was his biggest cheerleader. He handled the business side, the polished presentations to skeptical investors, the securing of initial seed funding from angel investors who saw the spark in Julian's eyes. He was the face, Silas was the engine. "We're a team, Silas," Julian would always say, a hand clapped firmly on Silas's shoulder. "My vision, your genius. Together, we'll change the world." Those words, once a source of comfort and motivation, now echoed with a bitter irony in Silas's mind. But somewhere along the way, the we began to unravel. Slowly, subtly, Julian's language shifted. Silas's ideas became our ideas, then my ideas that Silas had helped develop. It started innocuously enough, a slight rephrasing in an investor update, a casual comment during a team meeting that made Silas's stomach clench. Then came the exclusion. Julian started handling all communications with investors, clients, and even potential employees, often excluding Silas from critical meetings where fundamental design decisions were being made. Silas would later find out about major strategic shifts through second-hand whispers or internal memos he wasn't privy to until after the fact. A particularly painful memory involved an early pitch to a major hospital network. Julian had insisted Silas wasn't needed, saying he'd handle the technical questions. Silas later learned Julian had presented Ether's core architecture as his own innovative design, brushing over Silas's foundational contributions. Then came the separate shell corporation. Julian presented it as a necessary step for streamlining intellectual property management and future expansion. He spoke convincingly of legal protections, tax efficiencies, and the need for agile decision-making in a fast-paced industry. Silas, naive and trusting, focused solely on the code, believing their bond, their shared history, was immutable. He reviewed the documents Julian provided, complex legalese that obscured the true implications, designed to be confusing without deep legal scrutiny. He trusted Julian's assurances that it was merely an administrative formality. He signed, unaware that the structure granted Julian sole controlling interest, effectively making Ether's intellectual property Julian's alone, with Silas relegated to a mere contractor. He saw Julian's growing ambition as a positive force, a necessary drive to push Ether into the world, to fulfill its life-saving potential. He didn't see the insidious shift, the slow, calculated erosion of his ownership, the meticulous construction of a cage around his creation. The breaking point arrived with a cold email, an official notification that his consulting contract was terminated due to creative differences, and a restructuring of the core team. The clinical language was a brutal slap. His access to the development servers was revoked instantaneously. His name was scrubbed from all project documentation, replaced by Julian's. He tried to log in, his fingers flying across the keyboard, only to be met by a stern denial message. A wave of nausea washed over him. Julian had used the Shell Corporation, which Silas had signed over to him for ease of business operations, to legally sever him from his own creation. The shock was visceral, a physical blow, leaving him gasping for air in his desolate apartment. The betrayal felt like a gaping wound, a gaping hole where his life's work had once been. Weeks blurred into a haze of disbelief, anger, and profound sadness. He saw his life's work, his very identity, stolen and rebranded, paraded as another man's genius. Julian even tried to paint him as erratic, unstable, unable to handle the pressure of such a revolutionary project, spinning a narrative to investors and mutual acquaintances that Silas had suffered a breakdown, a creative block, forcing Julian to step in and save the project. A few former colleagues, hesitant and awkward, reached out, their words laced with pity, asking if he was doing okay. But amidst the despair, a different emotion began to crystallize: clarity. He had always been meticulous, almost pathologically so. Every line of code, every system he built, had redundancies, fail-safes, and crucially, an inherent, almost artistic signature. It was less a security measure against betrayal and more an ingrained habit of proving provenance, ensuring the integrity and authenticity of his work. Years before, almost instinctively, in the early foundational layers of Aether, he had conceived of a unique, self-propagating authentication system. It was a digital watermark tied not just to a traditional cryptographic key, but to a complex, evolving algorithm that was intrinsically linked to his unique coding patterns, his very intellectual fingerprint. This system, dubbed Veritas, or Truth, in his private documentation, was embedded deep within Aether's core, an almost sentient monitor of its own origins. It was designed to activate only under specific, subtle conditions, a combination of prolonged network activity patterns, specific, complex data queries indicative of broad, real-world deployment, and sustained operation outside of his direct, validated oversight. It was a digital truth bomb, a silent, dormant module he had built not out of paranoia, but out of a deep, almost philosophical conviction that true creation cannot be permanently disowned. Julian, with all his charisma and business acumen, understood nothing of the intricate ballet of logic and intuition that brought Aether to life. He saw the surface, never the depths. And it was in those depths that his secret weapon lay waiting, a delayed action trigger that would, when the time was right, reveal the true architect. His initial period of apparent grief and disappearance was, in fact, a meticulously planned withdrawal. He allowed the whispers of his instability to circulate, even subtly contributing to them by declining calls and retreating further into his solitary existence. He liquidated a few small, personal investments, enough to cover his humble living expenses for a significant period, ensuring he wouldn't need to resurface for financial reasons. Julian, in his hubris, interpreted his silence as capitulation, his absence as proof of his narrative that Silas was simply not up to the task. He publicly stated that Silas had struggled with the immense pressures of Aether's development, and had decided to step away for personal reasons. He even expressed sadness at Silas's departure during a televised interview, painting himself as the benevolent leader who had tried his best to support a troubled colleague. Silas let him. He needed Julian to believe he had won decisively, to solidify his false claim to Aether. Every public appearance Julian made, every interview where he eloquently articulated his vision for the AI, only served to strengthen the foundation upon which his inevitable downfall would be built. The higher Julian climbed, the further he stretched his deceit, the more spectacular the fall would be. While Julian's star ascended, Silas worked in the shadows, not on revenge, but on surgical precision. His actions were minimal but impactful, a series of chess moves on a board only he truly understood. He quietly secured irrefutable, independently verifiable backups of every iteration of Aether's code, meticulously cross-referencing them with his original development logs. These logs, dating back years, were time-stamped, cryptographically signed, and even notarized by a trusted, albeit bewildered, digital forensics expert Silas had hired under strict non-disclosure agreements. He didn't need to infiltrate Julian's systems, his embedded truth bomb, Veritas, was already there, patiently waiting. His task now was to ensure the conditions for its activation were met. He monitored Ether's public demonstrations, observing its network traffic patterns, its data queries, its overall operational footprint. He could see how Julian was deploying it, the specific types of challenges he was pushing it to solve. He knew the precise parameters that would trigger his embedded authentication system. It wasn't a malicious attack, it was an internal audit, a self-correction mechanism designed to verify authorship. Julian, unknowingly, was providing all the necessary inputs through Ether's widespread deployment, and the very public nature of its operation. Ether's very success under Julian was contributing to its own true revelation. Mutual friends, former colleagues, they occasionally reached out. Their pity was palpable, their words carefully chosen. "Silas, I'm so sorry to hear what happened. Julian seems to be doing so well with Ether, it's incredible." Their voices, though sympathetic, carried an undertone of having moved on, of accepting Julian's version of reality. A former mentor, a respected figure in the tech community, even called to offer him a soft landing at a small, struggling startup, a gesture that spoke volumes about how his reputation had been eroded. Silas offered vague, non-committal responses, letting them believe Julian's version of events. Some even encouraged him to move on, to find something new, subtly implying he should abandon Ether entirely. Their words, meant to console, only reinforced the depth of Julian's deception and the extent to which he had successfully rewritten history. Silas let them. His strategic silence was a critical component of his plan. The less he protested, the more confident Julian became. Julian expanded Ether's reach, signing major contracts with prestigious hospitals in New York, London, and Tokyo, and securing partnerships with leading research institutions. He presented Ether at prestigious medical conferences, demonstrating its capabilities live on stage, effortlessly weaving tales of medical miracles and future breakthroughs. Each successful public display, each new partnership, was another layer of concrete poured over the truth, making Julian's edifice seem impenetrable. He built his empire on Silas's foundation, unaware that embedded within that very foundation was a meticulously calibrated device set to expose every single lie. Every public demonstration of Ether, every triumphant feature Julian unveiled, was a step closer to its true revelation, though no one, least of all Julian, could possibly discern the intricate gears turning beneath the surface. Julian was setting the stage for himself, unknowingly preparing the perfect platform for the truth to be unleashed. The longer he basked in the stolen glory, the higher he climbed, the more spectacular the fall would be. The moment he had patiently waited for arrived with the announcement of the Global Tech Summit, an event renowned for bringing together the most influential minds and groundbreaking technologies in the world. Julian was scheduled to deliver the keynote address and conduct a live, interactive demonstration of Ether's latest advancements. It was the largest, most prestigious platform Julian had ever commanded, a global audience of industry leaders, investors, and media. The perfect stage. Silas secured a virtual attendance pass, ensuring he would be watching, unseen, unheard, a phantom in the digital crowd. A quiet anticipation, cold and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel, filled him. He had run countless simulations, checked every parameter, verified every contingency. The plan was flawless. Julian, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit and radiating an almost blinding confidence, strode onto the illuminated stage. The air crackled with anticipation, a palpable hum that even through the screen, Silas could feel. Julian began his address, a polished narrative of his visionary journey, with Ether, his voice resonating with an almost messianic fervor. He spoke of the lives Ether would save, the medical breakthroughs it would enable, all attributed solely to his genius. He even included a carefully curated anecdote about a child whose rare disease Ether had supposedly diagnosed, A story designed to tug at heartstrings and solidify his image as a compassionate innovator. The audience hung on his every word, captivated. Then came the live demonstration. A complex medical case study was loaded into Aether's interface on the massive screen behind Julian. It was a simulated patient with ambiguous symptoms, persistent fatigue, intermittent fevers, and a constellation of seemingly unrelated neurological signs, a true diagnostic puzzle designed to showcase Aether's advanced capabilities. Julian directed the AI to analyze patient history, obscure lab results, and intricate genetic markers. Watch as Aether processes millions of data points in seconds, drawing connections no human mind could, he proclaimed, his hand sweeping towards the massive screen behind him, displaying Aether's sleek, intuitive interface. This was Silas's cue. Months of meticulous monitoring, of understanding Aether's operational parameters under live stress and high data load, had led him to this precise moment. His embedded system, Veritas, wasn't a virus, it was an authentication protocol. It required specific conditions, a high-stress, high-visibility operational environment, coupled with a series of complex, interlinked data queries that mimicked a profound diagnostic challenge, pushing Aether's processing capabilities to their limits. Julian, in his eagerness to impress the global audience, was providing precisely these conditions. He was unknowingly winding the clock on his own downfall. As Aether crunched the data, its sophisticated algorithms whirring, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift occurred on the screen. The diagnostic conclusion began to form, outlining a rare autoimmune disorder, a brilliant display of Aether's processing power. But beneath it, like a ghost in the machine, a secondary display flickered to life. It started innocuously enough, a series of complex mathematical equations, then a sequence of algorithmic patterns, abstract and seemingly random to the untrained eye. Julian, still absorbed in his confident narration, didn't notice immediately. He was too busy explaining the nuances of the simulated diagnosis. But then, the patterns began to resolve into something more distinct. Silas's unique coding signature, a complex, almost artistic watermark woven into the very fabric of Aether's core algorithms, began to propagate across the display, overlaid onto the diagnostic results. It wasn't just a simple name, it was the indelible imprint of his intellectual methodology, a visual representation of his cognitive fingerprint, a signature only he could have created, deeply embedded within the very logic of the AI. The audience, at first, merely leaned forward, curious about the unexpected visual elements, assuming it was part of the advanced display. But then, as the patterns coalesced further, they formed a sequence of timestamps, file paths, and encrypted commit messages, all pointing directly to Silas's original development repository, complete with his authentication keys and biometric logins from years ago. And finally, unmistakably in elegant, self-generating script, the words appeared, resizing themselves, growing bolder, dominating the screen. Authored by Silas Vance. Original patent filing, SV 2018 Aether 001. All rights reserved. A collective gasp swept through the auditorium, a wave of stunned realization. Julian's confident smile faltered. His eyes darted to the screen, then back to the audience, then back to the screen in a desperate dance of disbelief and dawning horror. The color drained from his face, leaving it ashen. He tried to laugh it off, a strained, desperate sound that cracked in the vast hall. A glitch, perhaps. An unexpected system artifact. These complex AIs sometimes develop quirks. He fumbled with the controls, sweat beading on his forehead, trying to dismiss the overlay. But it was self-propagating, resizing itself, mirroring across all auxiliary screens, a relentless tide of truth that could not be stopped. Veritas had spoken. Silas watched from his quiet corner, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. It wasn't a malicious grin, but the quiet satisfaction of a complex problem finding its elegant solution. Every line of code he wrote, Every complex algorithm he painstakingly crafted bore an indelible signature. Not just his digital fingerprint, but a philosophical watermark, a unique pattern of thought that was intrinsically his. Julian had stolen the body, but he could never truly erase the soul. The truth, finally, had found its voice, speaking through the very creation it had birthed. The immediate aftermath was a maelstrom. The Global Tech Summit, once a beacon of innovation, became a crucible of scandal. Journalists swarmed, their questions sharp and unrelenting, cameras flashed, and the murmuring audience erupted into a cacophony of questions and accusations. Julian, his face contorted in a mask of panic and rage, was whisked off stage by his frantic team, his carefully constructed facade crumbling in real time under the weight of undeniable evidence. His desperate attempts to shut down Ether, to erase the evidence, were futile. The embedded authentication system, designed not for external attack but for internal provenance, continued to display its undeniable truth, projecting Silas's name and original ownership details onto every available screen, even flashing across the monitors in the packed press room. The world watched in real time as a titan of industry fell. The financial fallout was swift and brutal. Within hours, Julian's company, Thorn Innovations, saw its stock plummet by over 80%. Investor confidence evaporated like mist. Major institutional investors, smelling blood in the water, initiated immediate investigations into IP theft and fraudulent claims. Legal teams, initially scrambling to defend Julian, quickly pivoted, realizing the irrefutable nature of the evidence. Silas's digital paper trail was impeccable, reinforced by the living proof within Ether itself, a testament to his foresight and meticulousness. Emergency board meetings dissolved into recriminations, and several high-profile executives resigned within days, distancing themselves from the sinking ship. The reactions of others were varied, and in some cases, profoundly telling. Former colleagues, many of whom had believed Julian's narrative and perhaps even distanced themselves from Silas, reached out with expressions of shock and, in some cases, heartfelt apologies. "Silas, I can't believe it," one messaged, his words heavy with regret. "I'm so incredibly sorry. We all believed him." Their regret was palpable, their embarrassment evident. Some, more opportunistic, quickly tried to distance themselves from Julian, attempting to salvage their own reputations by publicly condemning his actions or claiming they had always had their suspicions. Silas received calls from venture capitalists who had once dismissed him with a polite but firm "not a good fit," now eager to discuss future opportunities, and begging for meetings. He handled them with a calm, almost detached professionalism, a stark contrast to the desperation on the other end of the line. Julian himself became a pariah. His attempts to discredit Silas, to claim he was a disgruntled employee or a saboteur who had injected malicious code, were met with widespread derision. The truth, projected by Ether itself, was too compelling, too undeniable. He faced multiple lawsuits from defrauded investors, criminal investigations for intellectual property theft and fraud, and the complete collapse of his professional standing. His carefully cultivated public image shattered into 1,000 pieces. His empire, built on a foundation of deceit, disintegrated with astonishing speed. The man who had once commanded stages and captivated audiences now faced public humiliation and the very real prospect of prison. His arrogance, once his greatest strength in the eyes of the world, became his undoing, leading him to believe he was invincible, that Silas's quiet nature was weakness, a flaw to be exploited rather than a deep well of strategic thought. For Silas, there was no triumphant gloating, no public celebrations. The satisfaction he felt was a quiet, internal one, a profound sense of equilibrium restored. It wasn't revenge, it was justice. The scales were not merely balanced, they were finally set right. The burden he had carried for so long, the weight of a stolen identity and a misappropriated legacy, had finally been lifted. The cold, analytical part of him saw it as the inevitable conclusion of a complex algorithm, a logical progression from input to output, a system self-correcting. The human part of him felt a profound sense of peace, a quiet joy that resonated deep within his being. Months have passed since the summit, since the truth of Aether's creation sent shockwaves through the tech world. Julian Thorne is a name now synonymous with scandal, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms and lectured in business ethics classes. His company is in receivership, its assets being liquidated to pay off creditors and settle lawsuits. His public life, once so vibrant and omnipresent, has been extinguished. He has faded into obscurity, or worse, infamy. His own life, however, has transformed. He reclaimed Aether, not through brute force, but through irrefutable, undeniable proof. The legal battles were swift and decisive, given the mountain of evidence, the time-stamped code, and Aether's own internal testimony. He decided against simply rejoining the existing framework. Instead, he established his own research institute, Aether Labs, dedicated to ethical AI development and true collaborative innovation. Aether itself, now under his direct and legitimate oversight, is flourishing. It continues to evolve, fulfilling its original promise, saving lives, and pushing the boundaries of medical science, unburdened by the shadow of deceit, its true potential finally unfurling. His days are still long, filled with intense coding and groundbreaking research, but the weariness in his eyes is now the familiar, welcome fatigue of creative endeavor, the satisfying exhaustion of bringing innovative ideas to life, not the draining weariness of injustice. He's learned invaluable lessons from this experience. He's learned that trust, once broken, leaves scars that may never fully heal, but also that true innovation cannot be stolen, it can only be delayed. Julian believed he could claim ownership of his intellect, his passion, his very essence. He was wrong. The intricate beauty of an idea, the unique signature of its creator, is an indelible mark that transcends legal documents and public narratives. It's embedded in the very fabric of the creation itself, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The path to justice, he's come to understand, is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it's a quiet, meticulous journey, a patient weaving of threads, a silent cultivation of truth in the shadows. And while the world may initially be deceived by charisma and cunning, the truth, like a perfectly crafted algorithm, always finds its way to the surface, reshaping the landscape in its wake. It reveals that integrity, perseverance, and the intrinsic value of one's genuine effort are forces far more powerful than any fleeting deception, ensuring that ultimately, what is truly yours will always find its way back home. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss similar narratives of triumph and betrayal. What did you think of Silas's long-term plan? Do you believe justice always finds its way, even if it's a quiet one? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.